set, wheat, noof. What on earth am I going to talk about? The show is The Acid Capitalist. The title, The Sovereign Parasite. I am the acid capitalist. I'm broadcasting from a rock in the Caribbean. Well, you call it St. Bart's, I call it home. It is late again. And you know what? The sea behind me, the sea is flat. I'm thinking mercury and silver for the last 10 days. The wind has dropped, the air pressure is high, and the tropics. Maybe the tropics, like the British electorate, or maybe the tropics, like the Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer. Maybe the tropics are holding their breath. Welcome, my brothers and sisters. Take the lights down, join me in the darker hours, because we need to talk about Britain, the country I left. Was it 10? Was it 11 years ago? 2015. The country that taught me maybe everything I know, or certainly everything I forgot. Which is it? It's a country with a kind of terrible, dignified, it was a dignified slowness. I'm not sure it's either dignified, and I'm not sure it's going to prove slow in the days, the weeks, and the months to come. The United Kingdom is eating itself. And tonight, as the acid capitalist, I want to explain why. And I don't want to do that with jargon. I'm certainly not doing it with acronyms. I'm doing it with the one tool that never lies. And we are talking about, my friends, we're talking about price. And tonight, we're going to do 3, not 2, my friends, but 3 movements. The ghost story, the autopsy, the trade. And by the end of this, I promise, as we listen to Underworld, do you hear it? Do you hear it? Do you hear it? Do you hear it? By the end of this, maybe you won't look at Britain the same way again. Before we begin, August the 2nd to August the 6th, the 4th summer acid camp here in St. Bart's with me on this beautiful rock. All skill levels. The dumber, the better. You certainly don't need to know anything. You just know where to find me. And it's a small island. Just say, where's the acid capitalist? Just bring a brain that's modestly alive. Come swim, come argue, come watch the sun go down. Sip cocktails with people who give a damn. I say to people, come as a stranger, leave as a friend. It might change your life. Change mine. Details in the link to the show notes. Right. Boom, 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 boom. Let's go. Let's do the ghost story. Because I want to start with a picture. I want to start with the old War Office in London. The building where Churchill once stood, poring over maps, counting ships, counting aircraft, bodies. The man was dictating time. The old War Office is a hotel now. It's called Raffles. 5 stars. That's not a military rank. That's a function of the crispness of the sheets. But it's mostly foreign guests checking in on the floors where an empire used to think, used to breathe, used to expand, used to have relevance. And next door is the Admiralty, the building. And that too is being stripped and repurposed for hospitality. Portsmouth is selling the Citadel, 17th century fortress. Interesting point. You know, like the cannons, they were often like facing the town because the citizens of Portsmouth were a little bit of a radical crowd. Anyway, 17th century fortress being sold, another hotel in the making. But they are quirky real estate stories. But more than that, they are balance sheet adjustments. This is the ratio that stopped me cold. Britain has 22 ships in the Royal Navy and 72 admirals to argue over 22 ships in the Royal Navy. The NHS, the National Health System, carries more administrators than nurses. And the British Army, fewer deployable tanks than Belgium did in 1940. 3 ratios, my friend, 1 country. The fractal repeating because the system, the British system, the sovereign system has outgrown its own purpose. And I want to say to you, it's eating itself to sustain itself. And whilst you think about that, everything I'm about to explain lives in longer form on my Substack and my Patreon. Tonight's paper, The Sovereign Parasite. It's roughly 5,000 words. What did you do at the weekend? I wrote half a dissertation. It's 20 minutes to read. This will probably take me twice that time. I think those 20 minutes, they might just change. They might tip the balance of how you view the UK and other European bond markets. I would urge you, subscribe tonight. The link, like the camp, it's in the show notes. Anyway, there's a grand bargain. Let me take you back to something that once made sense. Because for most of the last century, the nation state, it was genuinely worth the price of keeping. Defense was definitely cheaper when you just pooled it. Roads, hospitals, schools, cheaper at the scale. Imagine if every town had to defend itself alone, if every family had to carry its own catastrophe risk, where would we be? That was more expensive than paying taxes and letting the state do it. Clearly a deal was struck, and the deal was struck after the great loss of humanity after the First World War. The state said, give us your taxes, send us your sons to fight when we need them, and in return, we'll give you rights, universal rights, votes, welfare, pensions, a health system, an education system, the future. Some might say we were promised, I know this sounds very Church of England, which is certainly not my denomination, we were promised a new Jerusalem. And for a while it worked, because the deal was never just moral, it was actually fucking practical. The state needed the mass, and so the mass got a claim on the state. But here's where the story changes. I want to call this is the inversion. Because that deal, the reason that the state and its citizens codepended upon each other, it's quietly and certainly without announcement, but I want to say it's flipped and turned around. Think about war first, and unfortunately we're getting many lucid examples of it from Ukraine and now Iran. War makes my logic sharp. The Americans have just dismantled the Iranian Air Force and Navy without a single soldier on the ground. Drones, AI, precision systems, intelligence that moves faster than any human command structure. And here's the clincher. You don't conscript a drone. You don't like phone Amazon and say, guys, listen, if you got any drones we could borrow for the war effort. You don't conscript drones, you make them in a fucking factory. The mass, the bodies, the humanity, the millions of ordinary people the state needed for its industrial wars. And World War I in particular was industrial in its scale of tragedy and brutality. But the state no longer requires your sons in the way that it once did. And that's the inversion. Let's bring that logic, that same logic to work. Think about everyone who sits between capital and labour. So now we're in the economic model, the gross domestic product, the GDP of the country. I'm talking about the human paste between capital and labour. I'm talking about the lawyer doing the discovery work, the accountant building the tax model, the analyst writing the research note that I never read, the consultant building the deck that I never presented, never had a deck, the compliance officer that told me off. Do you know I hired my first compliance officer? I made him the trader. Anyway, the fucking administrators, the list goes on and on and on. All of it, all of that expensive, educated, middle class, human machinery, that's being repriced from necessity to overhead. It's a model that costs the competing model. My arguments exist on the perpendicular, when you're inside looking outside and when you're outside looking inside. So what I mean is all of that expensive, educated, middle class, human machinery, the repricing is what concerns me. Because you see, I know, a model that costs $20 a month is doing what all of those people were paid hundreds of thousands of British pounds to do. The middle is not being murdered. Worse, it's being made optional. here's the trap the state finds itself in. It's revenue. I mean, the taxes that fund everything that the Labour government, the Conservative government, reform, those taxes largely come from that middle class glue. And that middle class glue is being sucked or hollowed out by the same technology. The state can't control this technology, and it doesn't fully understand this technology. So the technology of drones, of AI, of robotics that's taking the mass of humanity out of war is also the same technology that's taking the middle class out of the tax system. And that's potentially catastrophic because government promises do not shrink. Pensions, they don't get cheaper because the tax base moves to Monaco. Hospitals don't cost less because the memo is written by an AI program. Debt service doesn't care that the graduates have been automated. The state is listing, not because of a single knockout punch, but because the cost structure of the sovereign no longer clears because there are cheaper alternatives to the state. I want to talk about NATO for a second because it's very, very parallel and related. And there's a version of this story at the European level that no one in the polite newspapers wants to say out loud. See, NATO was never just a military alliance. If you look deeper, like everything, it was a financial arrangement. For sure, America carried the gun. America for sure paid the defense. And Europe, freed from the considerable cost of defense, Europe built something extraordinary, something it's very proud of. It built the welfare state. It built the pension. It built the public health system. Oh, post-war social democratic cathedral. It's found not in America. America's stuff. It's found in Europe. But Europe rented its security from America. And it booked the savings as virtue. You don't think this is coming from some crank on a podcast with rum, a gun, gold, and a grudge. I have none of that. This is in the literature. It's polite. It's institutional. It's peer-reviewed literature. I had the pleasure of reading the 2026 Florence Report, which is published through the European University Institute. It's not my kind of place. It uses words like framework, structural adjustments, never raises its voice, never calls a spade a fucking spade. But you know what? It called NATO Europe's reduced responsibility model. Not a bug, not an oversight, but the operating system in plain sight. Europe did not build its civilization despite America carrying the gun. It built it because America was carrying the gun. The welfare, the pensions, the regulation, the moral vanity, the whole cathedral rested on the fact that someone else was absorbing the violence and handing Europe the bill. Gigantic discount. The Europeans knew. The institution knew. And the most damning thing is how quietly they said it. Reduced responsibility model. That's the sound of 70 years of free riding being summarized in 3 words by the people who benefited most. It's the politest possible language before the invoice, before the bill. The bill has arrived and the rent is rising. America spent $20 trillion more on the defense than all the other NATO members combined over the last 50 years. Combined. Remember, 50 years coincides with the peace dividend. Yeah. And the current United States administration has decided that the bill is coming home. Football ain't coming home, but the bill, the invoice is coming home. This is not ideology. This is not isolationism. This is the largest sovereign on planet Earth presenting Europe with a long overdue invoice. Ammunition has a price. Air defense has a price. Energy security has a price, Germany. And telling voters that the welfare state and the war state are now the same invoice, that has a price too. And that's the price that the Labour government is going to be subject to later this week when the UK goes to some regional polls. regional elections. And when those prices land on the European balance sheet, the sovereign European balance sheet, Europe no longer looks moral or sophisticated or inevitable. Europe begins to look like a financial arbitrage that's closed. I'm a finance kind of guy, and I've got to say that the mark to market on that closure, it's not going to be gentle. Dun, 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 dun. Let's do movement 2. I want to talk about the autopsy. I want to talk about how Britain built state it can't afford. Now, to do so, I'm going to have to speak about the specific mechanism that built modern Britain. Because Britain, the United Kingdom, it didn't just inherit a sovereign problem. I'm focusing on the UK because the UK specialised in the sovereign problem. Here's how I think the money worked, and I'm going to make this simple. So for decades, Germany, China, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Idal, they were running enormous trade surpluses. That means they sold way more to us than they bought from us. They were building all these factories, not for the domestic demand, because domestic demand, they were kind of suppressing people's wages. So you're kind of suppressing and keeping down people's wages. Wages went up, don't get me wrong. But productivity was going up way greater. And economic logic and fairness would dictate that you should pay the Chinese worker more. That did not happen. And so there was a need for a donor country to buy the exports that the suppressed wages of the mercantilist country could not afford to sustain. And the deal, and there's a deal between two sovereigns. The deal is you buy up our manufacturing surplus, and all that money that you're going to send to us, that's a surplus, that's a trade surplus. And it's going to go somewhere. It's going to come straight back at you, straight back at us. We get the money. And Britain was like, I kind of like the sound of that. Britain said, send your capital flows here. We have a stable, world-renowned legal system. We've got deep-ish financial markets. We've got old institutions that look trustworthy. And so the surplus capital of the world flowed into Britain. Not Britain alone, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and of course, the daddy of them all, the deep liquid markets, the rule of contract law, the rule of law, America. But surplus capital flowed into Britain, and it bought British government debt. It bought gilts at macroeconomic circles. We call this purchase of the gilts, we call that collateral, because these gilts have the look and the feel of an American treasury bond. And damn, you see, we've lived in a monetary system these last 40, 50 years when treasuries are the real deal. Treasuries are the gold of a bygone era, like the base money. And the accumulation of base money of treasuries and gilts and German bunds and Japanese JGBs into a huge foreign exchange reserve held by the likes of China, that becomes their moat. It becomes their security for a rainy day. It makes them almost impregnable. That's why the mercantilists voted for it, the donors of the capital. But the deal for the host countries like the United Kingdom, it's a bit harder. I mean, sometimes I feel like it was a bung. You know, the French call that a pot de vin, like a bribe. You see, because so much foreign money was chasing British debt that the interest rate, the gilt yield, the coupon divided by the price, the yield that Britain had to pay on its government debt, the cost of the government's money, when it was so much in demand, the cost stayed very, very low, really fucking low, which meant Britain could borrow cheaply. Not for days, not for weeks, not for months, for decades. And spend far beyond what it was actually producing, actually earning. So the NHS, the benefit system, the public sector wage bill, the pensions obligation, none of it, nada was funded by British output. It was funded by the willingness of foreign surplus capital to keep lending to the United Kingdom at rates made artificially cheap by a machine that was running overseas. All of this podcast tonight rests on Britain did not earn its state. Britain borrowed it at subsidized rates, at rates written by someone else, their continent. So what looked like welfare settlement built on British values and British taxation, in actual fact, it was a credit arrangement underwritten by Chinese import suppression and German wage restraint. The British sovereign was living inside someone else's industrial policy, mistaking it for social democracy. But here's the thing, where did the money actually go? Did it go into factories, into research, into building things, into deepening productive capacity in the United Kingdom? I think you know the answer. No, it went into property, into financial engineering, into asset prices. You see, money is like the selfish gene. It seeks its continuation. It wants to perpetuate itself to eternity. It just loves inflation. And British asset markets, like asset markets elsewhere, they offered this in droves, and capital loved it. London thrived. Those gleaming global extraordinary buildings, if you were inside them, the gherkin, the whatever. At the same time, the North hollowed. Wales hollowed. I mean, who cares? Scotland hollowed. I mean, we care. The North, Wales, Scotland, they hollowed. The productive regions became in the language of others, they were bypassed entirely. The state growing fat on suppressed borrowing costs, mistaking the foreign capital inflow for its own virtue. It wasn't a mirror. If it was a mirror, it was a black mirror. The message was wrong. The message was the state seemed invincible. Except now the machine is breaking. Why? Because America under Trump is no longer passively absorbing the surplus created by the mercantilist nations like China. Trump said, and I support this, he said enough is enough. Like trees are not meant to grow to the sky. The Chinese trade surplus was not meant to grow every single year. There was meant to be like a point of equilibrium, of disequilibrium. Like there was meant to be a cycle that would prevail. America began to recognize there was no exorbitant privilege. There was no gain to be had from being the consumer of last resort. This was an arrangement that was leading rapidly to the United States and these other noble, old, open countries like the United Kingdom becoming serfdoms of mercantilist nations. So instead, America stepped in and said, we want foreign capital, but we want it on our terms. We want to redirect it into our country, not into American asset markets, but into American factories, producing more American workers with higher wages, greater American infrastructure, and of course, AI, the great race to control tomorrow. And that matters hugely for the United Kingdom because the flow that kept British borrowing costs cheap is being redirected. The deal's being renegotiated. America's Samson is growing his fucking hair again, growing some much needed balls and standing up for the little guy. Now, America has the scale to make a difference. The UK, country built with promises built at subsidized rates, the subsidies being withdrawn whilst the promises remain. Ooh, that is not a good situation. That's a situation that needs a solution. So what is the British government doing about this? I mean, America is spending. It's got 4 hyperscalers, 4 private companies alone spending almost $1 trillion. It'll be $1 trillion next year. That's 4 private companies. I doubt the UK has $1 trillion to spend. Instead, the great minds of the civil service and the the political class. They've got a vision for the city of London. And I'm reading directly here on the top of my head. The Labour Party, the Chancellor, they want to reinvigorate risk-taking, promote innovation, attract more global banking and finance. Attract more global banking and finance. Read that again and again. In the middle of the biggest repricing of the economic system in like 100 years, Britain's answer is to become a better receptacle for the capital that's already leaving. I mean, are they fucking serious? UK administrators are spending all of their time polishing the Petri dish, deepening the dependency precisely as the dependency is being withdrawn by the valiant attempts of the US to insist on equilibrium in world trade. I mean, the old joke was that insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. But Britain has improved on the joke. It keeps doing the same thing and expecting the old result from a world that no longer supplies the input. The UK does not suffer, undoubtedly, alone from this. But let's discuss the welfare trap. I'm talking about the capital. It's not quite in flight mode yet, but it's not coming in the manner that it once did. The revenue. But the promises are still intact. Let's discuss welfare arithmetic. In the United Kingdom, it's called disability. It's sickness benefits. And they're spending £81 billion a year. Is that $120, $130 billion? UK, everything today just seems tiny and who cares with regard to when you compare it to the size of the United States. But the United Kingdom is spending £81 billion, $130 billion a year. And that is 1.5 times the size of the entire defense budget. 1.5 times the cost of defending the country. And they're spending that money so that citizens don't have to work in that country. Or put another way, the state is spending almost $100 billion annually managing incapacity while trying to build an AI superpower with sums that by comparison look like chicken shit. I mean, literally like a couple of 100 million spread over years. So they're spending 100 billion a year, growing into 100 billion a year. 100 billion, 100,000 million a year on incapacity, and maybe 100 million spread over the next 6 years. Last year, when they tried to cut 5 billion from that 81 billion number, 120, I'm not playing darts, but 120 of the government's MPs, ministers of parliament, they rebelled, they killed the plan. So here's the trap in its full terrible clarity. The state cannot cut the political cost. I mean, they've got an enormous political majority and they can't cut the insanity. The political cost is presently deemed to be greater than the borrowing cost. But it can only keep borrowing if the bond market keeps buying. And the bond market will only keep buying if the foreign capital from the mercantilists keeps flowing. And then over here, you've got the biggest sovereign and you've got crazy Trump saying, I'm not having it. I want that flow and I want that flow in the United States. Systems change when someone breaks for cover. Like the UK in the early 1930s was thankfully, it was the rogue. I don't mean rogue in any pejorative manner, but the UK was the rogue state when it put its hands up and said, the gold standard, nah. And kind of like that's what happened with Trump. He said, perpetual trade surplus system that favors China, nah, we're out. Biggest sovereign became rogue, and the funding of the British incapacity benefit system is becoming precarious. And you know, as I know, that the real yield on the British gilt is already moving higher. And it's not noise. It's not a fucking tantrum. The gilt market knows. The pound knows. It knows what every fucker with a Gulf Stream knew first. It's beginning to price the withdrawal of the mercantilist subsidy on the welfare state. So let's go back 50 years, more than 50 years, 1976. when Britain went to the IMF, when Britain was brought to its knees, hat in hand, the pound in free fall, credit exhausted. I say the pound in free fall. Pound today is trade weighted, not terribly far away from that exact spot. Not quite. We're 135, and like you'd be talking about another 35%. That's a big deal. That's a devaluation. But in 1976, the British Prime Minister and a Labour Prime Minister, so the same as the political colours presently in number 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister stood before his party and he told them, you cannot spend your way out of a recession. From the most unlikeliest source, Labour Conference Party, we heard one of the most honest speeches in British history, and it destroyed his government. Today, in 2026, the path of the debt, we call it the trajectory, the current account deficit, the thinning tax base, the structural element to the deficits that no budget dares to seek remedy for, the political paralysis of a government with a massive majority that cannot find the will to cut one single protected line. They couldn't find it within them to cut one line. I hear 1976, not perfectly, but enough to keep the question worth pricing. A government elected with one of the largest majorities in modern British history is facing a collapse in popular support that has no modern precedent. This is not midterm blues. This is a population concluding faster than any polling model that the British sovereign state is no longer working. Final section, the ghost story, the autopsy, the part that matters. Because markets don't pay you for understanding the decline, they pay you for knowing what comes next. And scarcity is bid. Here's the world we're moving into. The digital economy is building an abundance machine globally. I'm talking about intelligence, code, content, everything replicating at near zero marginal cost. Everything that can be copied will become cheap, which means capital is hunting the things that cannot be copied. Rock, coastline, island, jurisdiction, St. Bart's, island in the Caribbean. Guess what? It cannot be printed by a central bank. It can't be approved by a planning committee. In fact, planning committees are trying to make it tougher and tougher to build a house here. A friend was staying with me last week at Blanc Bleu. He was here to buy a property. He saw one listed at $31 million. I am the intel here, and I know that the owner of that property purchased it during COVID. I think he closed it in 2022. Nobody calls that a bubble because nobody serious believes that supply can respond. It's not speculation, it's inventory scarcity being repriced against a world where everything else is becoming abundant and cheap. Bar says many things, but it's not lifestyle. Well, it is lifestyle. It's my short position on the sovereign expressed in rock and coastline. When I left in 2015, I reckon the best London properties traded pari passu. They traded 1-for-1 with what you could buy on the island. I say that ratio has moved. I say it's moved in favour of St. Bart's. The premium you pay here is not for sunshine. It's for the absence of what's happening elsewhere, and I include France. London's the mirror image. The real estate desks won't say it loudly, but the flow tells you everything. Sell is everywhere, buyers thin, except at the very apex where a single house. I kind of know the guy I've met in St. Bart's, a hedge fund guy. Just bought a single house, cleared it, I think, £235 million. £235 million. That's not the housing market. That's a trophy. That's status, storage. That's the price itself becoming the moat. But below that level, London's exposed. Tax, regulation, politics, the war on the non-dom, thinning, retreating, receding buyer base. Lawyers, accountants, consultants, the entire professional glue that the city built. The city was built to employ these people. They're being hollowed out by a large language model that costs $20 a month. The middle of the London market is not collapsing because buyers ran out of money. It's collapsing because buyers ran out of patience with the bozos running the country. Wealth taxes is coming. Government, sensing the bleed, will reach inward. Wealth taxes, one-off levies, administrative friction dressed up as fairness. California already rehearsing the script. I mean, Stammer will be replaced, and he'll be replaced by someone with raider slogans. He or she will be cheered to the rafters. It won't work because the constraint has shifted. The people you need to tax are the ones most able to leave. They're already leaving quietly, efficiently, following the price. When the British Chancellor, will it still be the lady when she finally tables a wealth tax? Somewhere over the Atlantic, a man in a private jet with a coffee and a passport will read the headline on his phone, sip his coffee. He ain't coming back. There's a new geography that's already visible. You stop pretending you can see it. Miami, Dubai, Singapore, handful of alpine villages. Is it Aspen? Is it Vail? St. Barth? Argentina? Maybe Argentina. If Milei holds the line, God, I pray for his soul. He needs great security. These aren't vacation destinations. They're working prototypes of the next form of sovereignty. Sovereignty in the future is no longer a country. It's a cluster. It's a city-state. It's a fiscal microclimate, a place where capital and people can land without friction. Call it many things, but for me, the elite exit is not moral failure. It's the price discovery mechanism for what state services are actually worth, run in real time by the people with the means to vote with their feet. The very large landed estates of ancient Rome, now portfolios of jurisdictions, Miami, Dubai, Singapore. And I lament for that. Do I lament? I don't know. I note it. The lament comes more from the fact that I have children in the United Kingdom, stepping into an age where the old map is being handed to them with full confidence by people who still believe it works. I thought it worked. I got 2 kids about to leave university. When they started, I still believed in it. Study this, qualify for that, climb here, the system will meet you halfway. I believed it. It worked for me, but Britain was drawing on a credit arrangement with the Chinese that I confused with the social contract for do-gooding. The credential, the university credential has become a delay mechanism. It's become an extended year out, an extended gap. If there's a ladder, it's no longer connected to anything that pays. And again, the non-state has cost-effective answers. My kids are going to stay in a 5-star hotel in Malaysia in the month of August at an AI camp with kids, hungry kids from all over the world. Kids being taught how to put a presentation stack together, how to talk to private equity, how to raise money. Imagine that. Do you know how much that cost? Fucking grand. So the conversation changes, whether you're ready for it or not. It's not what you study. It's what are you building? Not how do you enter the system, but how do you root around it? How do you smash right through the damn thing? Right, I got to end this thing somewhere. The paper on Substack has a trade, but I'll let you find that out. Let me conclude. Britain built promises at subsidized interest rates. The cost of money was way below market for decades. And that subsidy is being withdrawn whilst the promises of the state remain. I'd watch 3 things. I'd watch the gilt-bund spread. I'd watch real 10-year gilt yields. I'd watch sterling against the jurisdictions where British capital wants to live. Switzerland, look at the British rate against the Swiss franc. Those prices will tell you more than the budget. They'll tell you more than the city strategy, more than another speech about growth and risk-taking from politicians who've never taken any risk in their life. And I repeat, trades are not prophecy. Trades are the balance sheet consequences of the sovereign settlement. The sovereign is no longer a relevant organization. And I'd be long the sovereign trying to reprice itself. And I'd be short the sovereign still polishing the Petri dish. Mind the gap, as they say when you're going underground. We should end with the jam. I fucking love Paul Weller. I love that song, Underground. But I'm not. I'm not, because I'm still here in St. Bart's. The sea is still flat behind me. The moon has shifted to the other side of the hillside. And somewhere in a treasury basement in London, someone is writing a press release. Someone's preparing another speech about growth and innovation. The host country, the United Kingdom, is going to wake up the day after tomorrow, the day after the elections. And it's going to try and act normal. It's not normal. It hasn't been normal for 40 or 50 years. I am Hugh Hendry. I am the asset capitalist. This has been broadcasting from a rock in the Caribbean, and I love you all to bits, and I thank you for spending more time with me this week. As I always say, bisous and hugs and kisses, and remember, happy people make smarter decisions. And talking of which, again, August 2nd to the 6th, the summer camp here in St. Bart's. Come, swim, argue. We'll put the world to rights over something gold. And the Substack, the full written version of everything you've just heard is there, people. Subscribe. Long form citations, trade notes, the thinking that doesn't fit in this microphone. I promise you the price will be there in the morning, and the price is the only honest thing in a crooked world. So before you go to sleep tonight, lock the doors, dim the lights, because I've decided to send you all to Coventry. It had to be the sound of a country going sideways. Unemployment, unrest, dread, and one of the greatest bass lines ever committed to music. It had to be the Specials. It had to be Ghost Town. Musically, this thing is bizarre and yet brilliant. Maybe that's what the tombstone of the United Kingdom sovereign will say. Bizarre and yet brilliant. Is ska slowed down? There's a wheezing trombone and ghostly flute line, but it's that dubby bass. It doesn't just describe urban decay. It sounds like walking through it. Until next week, good night, Hugh Hendry.
This place is coming like a ghost town. Bands won't play no more. Too much fighting on the dance floor. The shelf.